Good evening. My name is Carla Hunter, and I am the Program Planning and Development Chair of the Eastern Panhandle Alumnae Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And I want to welcome you to our program on behalf of our president, Velma Green. Delta House Rocks. Now, when I was growing up, we had something called Schoolhouse Rocks, where you can learn all about different information about how the government works, why a conjunction is a conjunction, whatever you needed to learn, you learned on Saturday morning. Well, as we go through this election process, we understand that not everybody understands how the government works and how important civic engagement is. And so we wanted to provide this webinar for you tonight. And I want to thank our partners, West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy and Delta for Women in Action. They're going to share important information that you need. So I hope that you have your notebook, your phone, your pen ready to take notes to share with your family, friends, and community. And now it is my pleasure to turn over this webinar to our Social Action Chair, Kimberly Crockett. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Carla. Again, my name is Kimberly Crockett, and I'm the Social Action Chair for Eastern Panhandle Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. It is my pleasure, my distinct pleasure, to introduce our speakers for you today. We're going to have two speakers. We're going to have Seth DeStefano, who's from the West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy. And we're also going to have Nicole Adams, who's a soror. She's a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority. And she's going to be speaking on behalf of Delta for Women in Action. The issues that we're going to address today are going to be our West Virginia legislative process and also the impact of Project 2025. We're going to kick things off this evening with the West Virginia legislative process with Seth DeStefano. Seth is a policy outreach director at the West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy, a native of Randolph County, West Virginia. Seth is a graduate of Tigard Valley High School and holds a BA in Liberal Arts and Sciences from West Virginia University. Seth leads the government affairs work at the center and is especially passionate about food security, tax justice issues, and building a better future for working families through policy change. So, Seth, we're going to turn things over to you, and we thank you again for agreeing to be with us this evening.
Thank you so much, Kimberly, and thank you to the Deltas for having me back. I always do appreciate the opportunity to talk with this organization specifically and all the great civic engagement trainings and opportunities that you take upon yourselves to do to be engaged citizens. Let's get right down to it. We are going to talk a little bit about some of the basics when it comes down to, and we'll get to that here in a minute. Let's break out the PowerPoint instead. That's what I'm looking for. Okay. Okay. So, all right, there we go. I wanted to just feature this outstanding graphic that was sent to me by Kimberly there. Absolutely love this Delta House Rock. I love the whole theme. I love everything about it. But it probably comes as no surprise that if you grew up with Schoolhouse Rock as a kid, things work maybe a tad differently down at the legislature in practice, right? And so over the course of the last, I don't know, maybe 10 years, well, I think 9 years so far, working with the West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy and representing us at the legislature during that time, I've come up with a few things that I think are important for folks to know. And so, you know, let's talk about like what makes us potentially anxious about coming to the Capitol for the first time. I really think this is important because if you spend a lot of time at the Capitol, sometimes people like me, we tend to make the mistake of talking at folks who might want to get engaged or curious about getting engaged, but have some anxieties because they don't spend a lot of time at the Capitol and they worry about things. They worry about like the basics, like where on earth do I park? How do I get in the building when I get there? What happens if I need to use the bathroom? What if I want a snack? Are there vending machines? Is there water available? What about a cafeteria? Who on earth are my representatives? Do you know who are my senators? Who, you know, are my delegates? What do you mean upper rotunda? What do you mean lower rotunda? All these different things. I just want you all to know to, regardless of what you want to do engagement wise, the Center on Budget and Policy has your back when it comes to the basics. Right now, through partnership with, I'm sure many of you know Dr. Shaniqua Smith and the Black Voter Impact Initiative and Black Policy Day. Through that, every Sunday during what is referred to as legislative interims, I give a basic tour of the Capitol, right? We take folks down specifically with an emphasis on folks who represent Black communities and other marginalized communities, and we make sure people know how to get in the building, right? We make sure folks know, listen, here's where the good parking is. Here's this is where you really want to be if you want to park and get in the building. We'll give you a tour with an emphasis on the different landmarks kind of within the Capitol, so you can always figure out how to get your way around. And we can, if you wish, we can help you get a meeting with your senators and delegates and help you prep beforehand. And so if you've been thinking about making that 6 hour plus journey down from Martinsburg or Carneysville or wherever it is you're from in the Eastern Panhandle of the state, to really make it worth your time, and maybe been thinking about what about all, don't worry about the basics. We will help you. We promise. That's our commitment to you. So let's get into, some of the big 30,000 foot view things when it comes to our state legislature. The first thing I'd like to talk about is the reality of supermajority control, right? This is West Virginia. Republicans are in charge. That's the end of the story. The majority sets the agenda. Supermajorities do present some unique challenges and kind of, opportunities to make legislative maneuvers, certain ones more important. I say this not to say that you should ever ignore members of the minority party. You shouldn't ignore Democrats in the West Virginia state legislature, but just be realistic that their power and their ability to make change and get bills passed is very limited in the current environment. My rule of thumb, and I am a professional lobbyist, it's what I do, on a full-time basis for the Center on Budget and Policy. If I talk with a Democrat about an issue or I'm doing education, I make a rule for myself that I have to talk to 3 Republicans on that same exact issue immediately afterwards, right? That's how I keep myself honest. 3-to-1 kind of ratio there, making sure I'm covering as much ground with the party that is in control and setting the agenda as I am the minority as well. It's important to recruit majority members to be the lead sponsors of your bills. I think this is, not anything that's new to Republican control in the legislature. When Democrats were in charge, it was important to get Democrats to introduce your bills. It's important as you're, working your way through the legislative process to get familiar and comfortable with talking with committee staff. Good relationships with committee staff are very important. Our legislature is a part-time legislature, which means they have full-time lives outside of their legislative duties. And a lot of lawmakers rely on staff of the various committees to inform them as to the pros and cons of a certain bill. So if you've had the opportunity to share your lived experience with perhaps a staffer on the health committee as to a bill that you're interested in, and that perspective sticks with them, that has a lot of power. Like there's a lot of power in that particular relationship and that particular communication. When a bill is in committee, right? So we talk about getting bills introduced. Let's say, for instance, Kimberly has done her due diligence. She has gotten her delegate from the Berkeley County area to be the lead sponsor and a champion of a bill. That bill gets introduced with a handful of other sponsors, and the bill shows up on committee. Really, the best place, the best opportunity to impact a bill is in that particular setting. The first reason why is that there's a lot fewer members to have to work, and anywhere between a dozen to 25 members given on the committee it is. And there are multiple points along the way in committee where you can, offer up an amendment or perhaps make a change or of some fashion, or, get the bill voted down. Or if it's a good bill, something you want to see pushed through, committee is the place to really put your emphasis and your time. Once bills make it out of a committee, it is more challenging to stop them at that point. Once a bill gets the committee kind of seal of approval, members on the floor, be it the House or the state Senate, tend to, and doesn't always happen this way, but it definitely happens a majority, more often than not, will give it the stamp of approval on the floor and clear it from that chamber. I think that one of the more important functions, and I think something to keep an eye on as you're working and building relationships with your delegation, is not just getting your people in front of committees, but also kind of questioning and challenging the idea of who is speaking in front of committees versus who is not speaking in front of committees. This is something that I think community groups and community organizations and civic engagement organizations should spend a lot more time focusing on. Don't get me wrong, I think it's really important for you to have those one-on-one conversations and build those relationships so you can make those asks of your lawmakers. But one of the things that's really important to zero in on is how come this person gets to testify in front of committee and not these folks, right? This is something that you see, and oftentimes it's not on accident, right? You will get some folks maybe to speak on behalf of childcare, and those folks, for instance, there was a meeting about a year ago down at Marshall University where the folks speaking on behalf of childcare represented a big hospital chain that wanted certain concessions so they could offer childcare to more of their employees, which I don't have a problem with. But my big question is how come that was the only voice speaking out on childcare, whereas low to middle income parents were not talking about the difficulties that maybe they didn't work at the hospital, maybe they maybe dad had a job managing down at Sheets and mom was a teacher, and they needed help affording the X amount of $1,000 a month they needed for childcare. It's really important to get your people in front of committees and also kind of challenge lawmakers if you feel that the perspective being offered in committee is not diverse enough, right? This is something that really needs some significant work in West Virginia, and it's something that I think organizations like the Deltas can help a lot with, right? You can point out to these members, look, you're not getting the whole story here. We need to get some new people in front of these committees. I think one of the most important things any citizen lobbyist can accomplish is building a good enough relationship with even just one lawmaker that they bring forward your issues and your points and your perspective and what is referred to as caucus. So a caucus is a group of lawmakers that is aligned in some way. Most caucuses are aligned through a partisan affiliation, right? So if you ever tuned in to like a House floor session and you hear the committee chairs or the vice chairs stand up, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your House Finance Committee will meet at 1 p.m. in the House Finance Committee room. House Finance Republicans will meet in the chairman's office 20 minutes before the meeting, right? Or you hear the majority leaders get up and say, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Republicans will caucus in the House chamber at 1:45, right? Anytime you hear that, what's happening is that those lawmakers who are aligned in that caucus are getting their ducks in a row, or they're hashing out differences over a particular issue, right? If you have really done your due diligence and you've spent a lot of time building a relationship with your House member and your state senators, they will and they can go forward into those rooms, because you and I are not allowed in those caucus rooms, right? But if you have done a good job building a relationship with your lawmaker, they can take your perspective into that caucus room and say, listen, let me tell you about this particular bill, or let me tell you about this appropriation, or let me tell you about the need for investment in communities in this and such a way. That is a huge win, right? That's a very, very effective way to move, to take a relationship with one or two members of the legislature and have it multiply several dozen times, right? And that's really how you can really make some progress at the state legislature. Folks, please let me know if I'm going too fast or if I'm saying anything that doesn't make any sense. For some reason, okay, nothing in the chat. Okay, good. Like I said, just a handful of lawmakers. One of the other things I like about the importance of caucus, as I call it, or caucus strategy, is it takes the pressure off thinking that you have to build relationships with all 134 members of the legislature. That's not possible. Honestly, quality beats quantity every single time. I don't care if you're a professional lobbyist that gets paid to do it for a living, or you're a citizen lobbyist making time, out of your day with what you can, with what you have. Just building a good, solid relationship with just a handful of members who respect your lived experience, who respect your perspective on things, and building that relationship to the point where they are carrying forward your message in caucus will get you so much further, be it in a committee meeting, be it on the floor, be it just about anywhere else along the way in the legislative process. than trying to spread yourself so thin that you're really not hitting lawmakers on that personal level, if that makes sense. And also, what this really leads to is the most effective kind of lobbying, which is what we refer to as lawmaker to lawmaker lobbying, right? If you've convinced your lawmaker to the point where they're willing to go talk to their colleagues on your behalf, that's a great way to get really get some traction on your issue. Lastly, and I think this is the last slide I have on caucus. You can absolutely, even though you are not, I am not, we the collective citizens are not allowed in these caucus meetings. You can absolutely ask your lawmaker, listen, I need you to bring this up in caucus, right? There's a bad bill on federal food assistance. It might take food away from 50,000 West Virginia kids. You need to tell your caucus that they don't want this on their conscience, right? They don't want to see this particular thing happen with this or Medicaid, or here's a good bill. You can and you should explicitly set the expectation with your lawmakers that you want them bringing up your perspective and your lived experience in caucus behind those closed doors. Absolutely, 100%. So let's talk interims. There are 3 sets of interims left throughout the course of the year. The first is going to be October 6th through the 8th, the second, November 10th through the 12th, and the third and last of this year, December 8th through the 10th. There is no better way to give yourself a preliminary view and a great foot in the door to understanding more about the legislature than coming down for interims. There's just no better way. One of the reasons it is so good is that it runs Sunday afternoon through the end of the day Tuesday. There's a lot of bills that are sent to be studied, right? And so a lot of times during interims, legislation that didn't make it over the finish line during the 60-day regular session is taken up for further review. And so it's a good way to kind of see the almost like the preseason of policy making in West Virginia. And lastly, and I think most important, one of the reasons interims is so important for citizens to take advantage of is that the stakes are a lot lower when it comes to relationship building with your lawmakers. And this is what I mean when I say that. During the session, when lawmakers see me coming and they're gavelled in and it's regular session, they know I'm coming to ask for something. The odds are if you're emailing your lawmakers or you're getting in the door, you're coming to ask for something too. You're maybe asking for them to sponsor a bill. Maybe you're asking them to vote no on something. Maybe you're asking them to offer up an amendment in committee. The pressure on both of you in that particular situation is a little bit higher than what you have at interims, because during interims, the legislature, they don't really vote on anything that's binding, right? They gavel in these meetings, they approve the minutes, they do the presentations, and then they adjourn. So it kind of opens up the door, and because the stakes are a lot lower, lawmakers are more comfortable getting to know you as a person, if that makes sense. And when these lawmakers, especially your lawmakers, they see you as a person, they see your lived experience, they respect you as an expert based on that, because you put some time in during interims. When regular session rolls around next February, they are far more likely to be like, you know what? Kimberly told me ABC about this bill, and that's the way it is. Carla said, this was a good bill, so I need to support it, and I need to talk about more in caucus and do these necessary steps. Can't stress it enough. Interims are absolutely the way to go. I just want to reinforce real quick. If you want to come down for interims, my understanding is that y'all might be coming down for interims in November, and we can talk a little bit more about that, or you can ask some questions later. Just the other thing about, interims that you can, a lot of times during interims, the governor's agencies have to make regular reports to the legislature. So, if there is an agency that is bothering you, or they're doing something that is annoying you, or they're not doing something you feel they are supposed to be doing, zeroing in on that interim committee meeting and talking with some lawmakers and prepping them and giving them some questions to ask is 100% legitimate to do and effective, to be honest with you, right? So here's just an example. I work with some coalition partners who are personally impacted by the criminal law system. Many have done time themselves, and organize communities all over the state. They are a regular presence. They do an incredible job with the Committee on Regional Jail Oversight. And they, if as things have not gone well in years past, they have done a very good job, getting good, strong questions in front of that committee, getting witnesses in front of that committee to ask, accountability questions, accountability-minded questions. You can do this with, the legislative oversight for, the Department of Health and Human Resources accountability. You can do this on education. You can do this through you can do this with any of these departments as they regularly come before these committees to testify, right? So roads ain't working. You've been trying to get like a giant pothole on what is it, 7 that runs down through I can't remember which one it is. Yeah, that's the one, right? That drives me crazy and makes me feel like I'm going to get run off the road anytime I'm on it. Right? You can get someone to ask during the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, hey, what about this issue on this road over here? People have been waiting months and it's dangerous. And what are we doing to get this fixed? What about the issue of the foster care crisis in our particular part of the state, and we're worried about A, B, and C. All of this can be accomplished during interims, and it's a great opportunity for citizen advocacy to not only draw attention to the issues you feel are important that may not be getting attention, but also to get yourself in the practice of working with your lawmakers to ask the questions you want them to ask. That's a big, what I feel is one of the bigger parts, just to kind of lead into what I talk about. If you've ever watched lawmakers during a committee, you may have asked yourself this question: how come they are talking about everything but what I think is important, right? Or my issue, right? They have this committee meeting on this subject that I think is important, but nobody's asking any good questions. The odds are is that, remember, these lawmakers have full-time lives outside of the legislature. They need people like you to educate them as to what is important about these issues. They need people with your lived experience to help prep them as to, listen, when you have the secretary of so-and-so, or when you have this witness in front of you, ask them these 2 questions. This is why these 2 questions are really important. You'll get to the bottom of this faster if you ask it in such a way. So I believe this is about it for me. I hope I didn't take up too much time. I just wanted to let everyone know that we are available for your interims. If you guys are already coordinating around November, and you would like someone to give you a tour of the Capitol that Sunday afternoon, please reach out to my colleague Alex, agallo@wvpolicy.org. And we will make sure that we give you, a good, quick, effective tour of the Capitol, so you can always have your bearings anytime, you want to come down and take meetings. It's not easy, and it's especially not easy coming all the way from the Eastern Panhandle. I acknowledge that. I respect that. Y'all are way out there. But the bottom line is if you figure out a way to try and get in maybe a half a day or maybe 1 day during each of the 3 interims that are left, you will find yourself far more prepared when regular session rolls around. And just lastly, other things in life, working lawmakers at the Capitol is a lot more fun with friends. Teams of 3 to 4 people working together, working on issues is not only effective, it's a lot of fun. I think, I've never seen anyone going around with a couple of groups of friends, holding their lawmakers accountable or working with them to ask good questions or making an impact in rooms that didn't have a smile on their face. So, don't be shy about doing that. And I believe that is really all I have. I think I might have a few moments for questions before I hand the mic over.
I have
You
2
do have
questions.
Sorry,
I
can
have a
we
question.
question
Oh, sorry.
in the chat?
Do that first.
Yeah, Aaron Mann has a question, and
Yeah.
the question is, how do I get in touch with the Regional Jail Committee?
So could you be a little more specific about
Sure. I've worked at Eastern Regional Jail for 22 years, retired, 23 years military, and I'm currently a probation officer in Front Royal, Virginia, out of District 11 for Winchester.
okay.
But I still have close ties to the West Virginia Regional Jails. I've done a lot in my career. When I worked there, I was all the way up to sergeant at Eastern, and I'm a captain at Potomac Collins. And a friend of mine currently is superintendent at Eastern Regional Jail. But my point is, everything up here in Martinsburg is about money. nationwide, it's about money in terms of trying to get correctional officers to work there. But it's more than that. It's not just money. There's so many internal things that needs to be fixed in these jails in West Virginia, particularly. Now that I've worked in Virginia, I see a different perspective. I have a different perspective of how things are ran. I understand you have, the overwork, the whole 9 yards, but it's so frustrating after working in those walls for so many years and seeing officers. Just the system in West Virginia, in my opinion, now that I don't work there anymore,
Can I jump
I
in
think
there?
the system. Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Just in the interest of time, I don't mean to cut you off. It's a great
Oh,
question.
I'm sorry.
And so what we're going to do here is I'm going to share my screen and give everyone a quick lesson on the legislature's website and how to make a good, quick, informed decision as to who to reach out to this specific issue. So
Okay.
the gentleman asked, who do I need to get in touch with at the regional jail committee? And so what we're going to do is we're going to type in wvlegislature.gov. That's the state legislature's website. And so when we're talking about interim committees and you want to find out who the membership are on these interim committees, you go to joint, this tab right here that says joint. And from here, the very first one you'll see says interim committee. So I'm going to click on that. All right. And so these are all the different interim committees. And the different, they're sorted by topics, basically. And so from here, we're going to come down to R, Regional Jail and Correctional Facility Authority. We're going to click on that and we're going to take a good look at the membership of this committee, right? So Delegate Kelly, I believe he is from the Tyler County area. Delegate Fast is down from Fayette. Delegate Garcia is from the Fairmont area. Delegate Green, I believe, is from down in Beckley. Delegate Hott is from Grant County, and Delegate Ward is from Hardy. So I don't really see any Eastern Panhandle types on the House member side of that committee, but the chair, the co-chair of the Regional Jail Committee is a gentleman named Jason Barrett. And Jason Barrett is charged as a senator for the representation of Berkeley and Jefferson counties. So, the first thing I ask myself when I'm, working with someone that has this question is, does this person live in an area and do they have a member on this particular committee? And the answer is yes, you do. So my advice would be the first place I would start would be getting communication into Senator Barrett. You can find his information here. He has both a Capitol office number. In this particular instance, I think it would be appropriate to reach out to his district phone number because they're kind of in an off period. And I would set up a meeting with him as soon as you can to go over kind of your concerns and kind of the perspective. And I think that's a great perspective. You brought up a great listen. I've worked in Virginia too, right? I have this experience in West Virginia, but I've got some experience next door and I see so many things happening that I think need to be addressed. And I want to talk to you about it. And I am a constituent. I am a constituent. Those 4 words can definitely unlock a lot of resistance from members of the state legislature, right? When
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So this is how that's kind of how I think that's your way into that particular committee. And I would be very, very surprised if Jason didn't meet with you. In fact, if he doesn't, or something gets lost in translation, I'm going to put my email in the chat. And if you don't get an answer back soon, please get in touch with me. And I'll track him down and harangue him and let him know, be like, listen, you've got a constituent who wants to talk to you about regional jails and you're the co-chair of the regional jail committee. You need to make this happen.
Thank you, Seth. Can I ask another question?
Absolutely.
At the beginning of your PowerPoint, you noted that one of the most impactful ways to get your issue that you're advocating in front of to make an impact early was to get in front of the committees.
Mhm.
Can you tell us if there's an issue that we want that we have an issue with? We don't like this bill and, we want to do what we can to stop it. What's the most impactful way that we can have an impact on that end?
Sure. So I think, kind of thinking in this context, I try to think, and I do this a lot because I play a lot of defense, right? I kill a lot of bills during the legislature. It's kind of my thing. What I would recommend is to take a historical perspective as to what that issue is and what has its journey been in the last couple of years, right? Who has introduced this bill? I don't know if you can be specific with me or if there's a very specific issue you're talking about. But if you're talking about gearing up for defense, odds are somebody has introduced a bill that concerns you, right? Maybe they did it last year, maybe they did it the year before. I think one of the best things you can do is work off the copies of the bills that have been introduced previous, and go in and talk to the co-sponsors of that bill during the off season and let them know your concerns and why you feel it's a bad piece of legislation or bad policy for West Virginia. A lot of times, and you can really get a lot of traction out of this, lawmakers tend to be a little bit more open about admitting their mistakes during the off season as opposed to when regular session starts. So if you come in and say, you know what, Delegate Crockett, I saw that you were a co-sponsor on this particular piece of legislation. My name is Seth and I represent so-and-so, and I'd like to talk a little bit about why I think it's concerning. When you do this in the off season, I have noticed over the years of doing this that you can get lawmakers to be open-minded about not sponsoring it again. And when you take co-sponsors away from a bill, that is a great first step to make sure it just doesn't go anywhere come regular session. Now, beyond that, if you find that a particular bill, say, you want to talk about, say you and your team have been fighting the same issue for 2 or 3 years now.
How about all of the bills that are aimed at voter suppression?
Okay. So like in this particular instance, I think when we talk about sorting by category, that particular issue is an issue that is addressed by the Judiciary Committee during interims, Joint Judiciary. And my advice is you want to talk to, so we'll go to joint here, we'll go to interim committees, and we will look up Judiciary. Here are the members. Senator Trump, that is an Eastern Panhandle senator.
Is he going to be leaving that position now that he's been elected to the intermediate court?
But he is still the Judiciary Chair until that happens, which I believe is until the end of the year. Senator Barrett is also on the Judiciary Committee. So we have 2 Eastern Panhandle senators right there, including Senator Rucker, another Eastern Panhandle state senator. On the House side, you have, let's have a look here. Hillenbrand is kind of Eastern Panhandle. That's kind of mineralish county, Kaiser area. Delegate Kump, that's an Eastern Panhandle lawmaker. Let's see here. Ridenauer, that's an Eastern Panhandle lawmaker. Yeah, so there is a healthy, like I said, the first thing I do is I kind of ask myself, listen, where would this issue reside? If you are a little uncertain, again, reach out to me. I can usually figure it out right off the top of my head. Then zero in on that joint committee, that interim committee, and say to yourself, okay, who from the Eastern Panhandle, generally speaking, is on this committee, right? And then that's going to be those lawmakers, I think, are the first ones you reach out to, right? With an ask per se about beginning, and you need to be specific when you do this. If your goal is to get your people in front of this committee to debunk a lot of what has been said about voting rights, you need to make sure that's explicit when you're talking with these folks. You need to make sure you're saying, listen, I want Joint Judiciary Committee to talk about, I want equal time for folks who can debunk and these witnesses who can prove that a lot of what is being said about voting access is wrong, more or less. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. You don't want to leave that ask vague, right? You want to make sure you're very, very explicit and specific. Just like the gentleman before me, he wants a meeting. He needs to tell Jason Barrett, I want a meeting, right? If your goal is to get some witnesses in front of the Joint Judiciary Committee, once you get your targets, right? Once you figure out, maybe 3 Senate members and 3 or 4 House members that are from the Eastern Panhandle, make sure you're being very specific with that ask. I have some good folks I think would be a good fit to testify, and I want them to testify during interims. That's how I would do it.
Excellent. Thank you. I don't think we have any other questions in the chat. So, Seth DeStefano, thank you so
Judy-
much. And
Judy
especially,
Ball has a question.
oh,
Kim.
Judy, I'm sorry.
Yes, Seth, this has been wonderful. I have learned a lot. I have two related questions. I'm from the League of Women Voters, and during the regular session, we follow we get emails from the communications directors from the House and Senate on a daily basis telling us what's coming up. Is there something like that for the interims?
Afraid not, unfortunately.
Okay, so the related part of that question is, I read a story in a newspaper that the Education Committee had received a report from the Department of Education. And so I went to the legislature's website to track down this report, figuring it would be attached to the agenda for that interim committee. It wasn't. So I went to the Department of Education's website, and the report wasn't there either. So eventually I ended up sending an email to the Department of Education. They were very nice. They sent me a copy of the report. But is it typical that the materials that are presented to these interim committees are not posted on the website?
Unfortunately, yes. Not all of the presentations that are made. Matter of fact, I would say a minority of the presentations that are made are not posted publicly to the website, but they do have to make them available. If you email the chairs of the committees, they are obligated to provide you a copy of something that was presented at a public meeting.
So is that the best place to go then?
That's my advice. Yeah. So if you're talking joint finance takes up, and there's a slideshow from the Secretary of Revenue, and you hear something and it piques your interest, and you're like, I want to see that. You would be best served by either directly calling. Sometimes first I'll call and then I follow up by email. First, usually what I'll do is I'll call like either House or Senate Finance and let them know I'm getting ready to email the chairman with a request for the presentation. And then I follow up via email, and then usually we don't have any trouble getting it after that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I think
All
we've gone over. I think I don't want to leach into Project 2025 because this is such an incredibly important. It's not often presidential candidates will literally give you 900 pages of what they intend to do. But I want to thank everyone. I have to hop off now. I'm on the West Coast at a conference on dealing with some things, and I'll have to run back downstairs. But again, please contact me anytime. We'd be more than happy to work around your schedule when you guys come down in November. And that's more than just Sunday. If you guys want to see, a lobbyist in action, if you want, I have a whole team of people at my office who are on standby and ready and willing to help.
Excellent. Well, we will definitely see you in November.
Okay. Thank you all again.
Thank you. And Seth provided us with a fantastic segue over to our Project 2025. And we have Nicole Scruggs Adams, who's going to be speaking with us today on behalf of Delta for Women in Action. Nicole is a business development professional with a passion for politics and service, having spent most of her career working in media. Nicole was a founding member of the Christian Science Monitor's Passcode Cybersecurity publication and a partner and writer for the women-focused investment newsletter Stock Savvy. Nicole became a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority in 1996 while attending Clark Atlanta University. During more than a decade as a member of the Baltimore Urban League Young Professionals, a group she helped to found within the Greater Baltimore Urban League, Nicole deepened her knowledge of, passion for, and work in local and national politics by leading and helping to organize the group's political and economic development programs, voter registration, and education outreach. A resident of Washington, D.C., Nicole's political involvement extended to work with the Congressional Black Caucus Annual Legislative Conference and as a volunteer with various local and national political campaigns. Currently, Nicole leads the Project 2025 Education Outreach Group within Delta for Women in Action and is writing a weekly limited series on the topic for the Savannah Tribune newspaper. Thank you, Nicole Scruggs Adams, and I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Okay, and you can see my screen?
We can see your screen.
Okay, great. Just want to make sure I'm all set up. So, you know what, just like gentlemen before me, I'm just a citizen who has a passion for politics. And so um I'm a political junkie and have been for well over a decade, and I just read information. And so Project 2025, I guess I got familiar with it around December of last year and started reading it, and was trying to sound out the alarm, but didn't really have a platform. So, thank goodness for Sora Briggins of Delta for Women in Action. I was connected to an amazing group of about 152 women who are working with me on getting the information and news out about this. But also, I got to give a shout out for Taraji P. Henson, who, what she did making that announcement at the BET Awards. It literally stoked all the interest in what we're doing right now. And I was so happy because I could finally, get my nerd out and tell everybody what was really going on. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump in and kind of share with you what we're doing. Within Delta for Women in Action, we built a little subgroup where we share information on a daily basis. So what we did is we developed a Google shared file that every weekday since July 17th includes information, video, meme, and write-up of a particular topic within Project 2025 that our members go ahead and they share on social media. They share that information as is, but we also have some really creative people, some really creative sorors who have done their own videos based on the information and have shared that out to hundreds of people. And luckily, we're seeing a little bit of an impact where that information is being shared across the nation. Also, in addition to that, I am another soror actually connected me with the Savannah Tribune, and I've been writing a weekly article focusing on a particular Project 2025 topic each week. And this is going to continue up until the week before the election. So that information is still available. I have a link to that at the end of the presentation where you can go and you can look at some of the archived and some of the older articles. I think there are about 8 or 9 that we have in the can right now. Now, what is Project 2025? Project 2025 is a 920-page manifesto that basically outlines what a right-wing wish list for what the Republicans, the GOP, plans to do with America if they are able to take power again. It was developed by the Heritage Foundation, which is a long-time right-wing organization that's been around actually since the Reagan era in the 1980s. They also assisted with Newt Gingrich's contract with America in the 1990s, which really gave them a foothold and made them a go-to organization for Republicans. When the information about Project 2025 was released, and it got a lot of negative press. President Trump and his group tried to distance themselves from it, but the truth is, more than 90% of the of Project 2025 is actually written by members of the last Trump administration. And right here is just a small list of some of the authors of it and what positions they held within the administration at that time. J.D. Vance, the vice president, he's also he wrote a foreword for the leader of Project 2025 for his new book. So that shows another connection. And even though Trump and his team are touting his Agenda 47, there are a lot of overlaps between Project 2025 and Agenda 47. I kind of call it a dumbed down version of Project 2025, where they may have just taken a few pieces and then just translated it into Agenda 47. So I am going to do a breakdown. There's so much information within Project 2025 that there's no way that I could address it all. So I'm kind of breaking it down actually according to our sorority's 5-point thrust and how it would impact us. So political awareness and involvement. This, one of the overarching themes of Project 2025 is a complete takeover of the federal government. One thing that, I know there are a lot of West Virginians who would take the train into Washington, D.C. and would work in Washington, D.C. And what a lot of them were able to do during the first Trump administration was to either slow walk or kind of stop some of the worst parts of the Trump administration's plans just by, being career government employees to kind of gum up the works a little bit, just to be honest with you. And at the end of Trump's last term, he actually put together and wrote an executive order that would essentially take away a lot of the protections that government employees had that kept them from being arbitrarily fired. He had planned to implement that during his next term, but he did not win. So when President Biden got into office, he was able to rescind that to keep that from happening. What Project 2025 plans to do is to fix that and essentially strip away the protections that that government employees have, like their labor unions, that keep them from being arbitrarily fired or demoted. The authors of Project 2025, in addition to writing this manifesto and to writing this directive, have also established a database of potential, appointees for the Trump administration. So they already have it ready to go in case he were to get back into office. One of the issues that they had in the last administration was they had a lot of positions that just went unfilled because they were not prepared. So living in DC, I would always see, you see members of the administration, it's always just, you see an influx of people. That didn't happen in the last administration. If Trump and the Republicans take power in the next one, there's going to be an influx of these people who have filled out these applications and want to be appointees of the president and of this administration. One particularly concerning part of Project 2025 is the desire to actually bypass Congress and their constitutional obligation to actually appoint people that the president the president wants to put into different positions. They basically call for him to appoint them before they are approved by Congress and let Congress catch up. This essentially puts individuals into positions who may not be prepared, who may not be qualified, who's only who may only be lackeys of the president, who are not vetted. And it puts them in the position and forces Congress to kind of catch up with the appointment when they've already been in place and may already be able to do whatever they want to do within that position. What they can't destroy, they're going to shrink drastically. So there are some departments that they may not be able to completely destroy, like the Civil Rights Division and like the Freedom of Information Act office. So what they plan to do is to essentially fire everyone but one person, and essentially make that one person either a political appointee or make them answerable to a political appointee. This essentially destroys the department because there is no way that one individual can handle a workload, especially when you're talking about FOIA requests or you're talking about something having to do with the Civil Rights Division. There's no way they can handle it, so it effectively kills it. Some of the other points is that makes FEMA emergency funding subject to arbitrary approval. So for example, I'm from Baltimore, and Baltimore was judged by the Trump administration as a sanctuary city for the undocumented. If, let's say that, God forbid, what happened with the Key Bridge had happened under the Trump administration and we needed emergency funding, or if we were to deal with a natural disaster, because some of our policies don't align with the administration, we could be denied funding, which would essentially permanently hobble any particular municipality or any particular place that may not agree with everything that the federal government or that the Trump administration is doing. It makes the National Weather Service a for-profit entity, which opens it up to influence from whoever they're getting their paycheck from, which puts in the question whether the weather report you're going to get is going to be accurate. It privatizes TSA. We are already paying enough money going through the airport. Having to, pay extra to fund, just going through security checkpoints and things like that. Not to mention, a lot of these positions, a lot of these contracts are farmed out to the lowest bidder. So we're going to be farming out TSA to the lowest bidder and potentially opening up ourselves to, to danger in our airways again. Less U.S. Immigration and Custom Enforcement, ICE raid sensitive zones, excuse me. One of, currently, ICE has a directive that there are certain zones they can't go into. They can't raid a church or a hospital or a school. This would remove that and would make it, as they said in Project 2025, leave it up to the officers to determine best practices or what they want to do or how to handle the situation, which just really opens it up to terrible things happening potentially. This is something that's particularly interesting to me as a resident of Washington, D.C. It allows the Federal Secret Service to police Washington, D.C. Basically, what they want to do is to let federal uniformed Secret Service go into Washington, D.C. as a police force and to police Washington, D.C. These are individuals who do not have any type of community any training in working with the community on that level. Not only that, they're not answerable to the citizens of the district. So they would basically be a rogue police force who would be able to go through, who are only answerable to the executive branch, and who would be able to police a city that is still predominantly African American. So that would be in itself be a huge problem. International awareness and involvement. They want to end cybercom's election involvement. So what cybercom is, it is an area within the Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security that basically governs and protects our election process. Not only do they go after misinformation that's attempted to be being spread by foreign actors in an attempt to kind of sway our elections, they also look after and they make sure that the integrity of our voting machines are intact. Project 2025 wants to remove those protections, which is the reason why is anyone's guess, but it would leave us very vulnerable to outside and internal influence by people like nefarious actors. Removes autonomy from the Voice of America. So currently, if you're familiar with the Voice of America, we do radio broadcasts all across the world. Yes, it does provide some level of promotion for the U.S. government, but it also works sort of autonomously with their reporters actually being able to have some freedoms to be able to report. This would effectively remove any autonomy from them and make them an arm of the administration. They would have the ability to present any type of propaganda that they wanted to, and to be able to shape the narrative however they want to, and it's broadcast to hundreds of countries across the world. Reduces climate change initiatives from the USAID foreign aid programs. Currently, the vast majority of issues and challenges that a lot of the countries that are getting aid from the United States are dealing with have to do with climate change, whether it's crops failing because of drought or flooding or any other manner of issues. This would basically make those challenges they're dealing with because of climate change a disqualifier for receiving any aid from us. And that's a big deal when you talk about countries that are really trying to improve the lives of their citizens and who rely on USAID for foreign aid for some assistance with helping to make that happen. Educational development. This calls for a complete elimination of the Department of Education. And, we're all very smart people on this call. And I know that that the Department of Education, in addition to working with public schools, they also deal with colleges and universities, funding for HBCUs in particular and other colleges and universities. They research and report on discrimination in education, whether it's discrimination based on race, on disability, on sex. They report on all of that. And they also deal with Title IX enforcement. So dismantling the Department of Education would essentially leave a lot of these positions within the wind. And they were talking about doing block grants for some funding and things like that, but it would really hobble all manners of education throughout this country. They want to specifically give decisions back to control of the states, which as an African American and knowing my history is not always a good thing for us. And they tout the Arizona voucher program as a shining light as to how this would work out. The Arizona voucher program directly gives funding to parents to be able to choose a private school that they want to send their kids to. The only problem is that as of June of this year, Arizona is in a $1.4 billion deficit directly related to the voucher program. They have had to cut services, had to cut funding to their college and university, to their public safety, to just lights on the streets because of the $1.4 billion deficit that was directly brought on because of the Arizona voucher program that Republicans and that the authors of Project 2025 are touting as being an example that should be followed by everyone across the country. Elimination of Head Start. What you're seeing is a direct quote from Project 2025 that has no citation and no basis in any type of fact that I've seen. But if you're familiar with Head Start basically helps low-income children to get ready for school. And they not only want to eliminate Head Start, but completely get rid of the entire Department of Office of Head Start. And they have no plan to replace it with anything else. Drastically reduces school free lunch programs. This essentially does some funny math to make it so that certain areas are not eligible for a free lunch program. So even if an individual child may be eligible for free lunch, it essentially makes them unqualified because their district or their school or particular neighborhood did not completely qualify for a free school lunch program. They want to practically eliminate the summer free food program for needy children. And what this program does and what it has done across the country is to provide food for children who are food insecure throughout the summer, because for a lot of them, the only food that they may be getting, or the majority of the food they may be getting, is from school. So a number of states have gotten funding from the federal government, which is currently providing it, to provide breakfast, lunch to these students, and snacks as well to these students. But the Office of Project 2025 want to eliminate that and only make lunch available to students who may be actually attending summer school programs. And as you can see in the quote, they don't want the schools to be turned into a federal catering program, even though there are hungry children that just need to be fed. Economic development. One of the things that the authors of Project 2025 want to do is to weaken worker-run labor unions. And the way they want to do that is to basically promote what they're calling joint employer and employee unions. But what that essentially does, it basically puts the employers in charge of the labor union, which takes away, negotiation abilities. It takes away the ability for employees to kind of push back against things that they may not, be happy with. And it takes away collective bargaining rights. So it essentially drastically weakens the worker-run labor unions. Effectively eliminates overtime pay. This is a particularly interesting one because even though they're touting it as something that's a partnership between the employer and the employee, what it essentially does, it enables the employer to calculate overtime based on a 2 or 4 week time period, as opposed to the mandated 7-day time period right now. So, and if you're an hourly worker, the employer can basically work you 50, 60 hours in one 7-day period. And then the next 7-day period, maybe just completely cut you down to 10 hours or 5 hours, or maybe not give you any time at all. That way they can work you really hard 1 week and not have to pay you overtime because they're calculating it over a longer period of time, which essentially gets rid of overtime pay, even though you're working way more hours than maybe any given week. It allows government contractors to pay their employees below market rate. So this rule that they want to rescind came about, I believe, in 1937, when there was a government contractor who was building a hospital. He had hired a number of African-American men to help build it and was not paying them correctly. And so the rule came about that essentially makes it mandatory for government contractors to pay the market rate of a particular area to the people that they hire to work that government contract. Ends the PAVE Fair Home Appraisal Program. If you're not familiar with PAVE, what it is It is an initiative that actually Vice President Harris started that is an answer to the Fair Home Appraisal program. This is an answer to the lopsided home appraisals that African Americans and Latinos are getting in comparable neighborhoods to white Americans. And what has been happening for decades is that if an appraiser sees that the home is owned by an African American or Latino, they will basically lowball the appraisal. And there have been, a number of articles that talk about when, we take down our pictures and we have a white friend who goes in and they act like they're the homeowner, but the appraisal comes back differently. The PAVE program is specifically designed to provide bias training and provide a route for American families to be able to get the full benefit of of their biggest investment. And and Project 2025 looks to absolutely rescind that. Reduces funding for universal childcare. This, in my opinion, is based on a fantasy where there are everyone has a two-parent household. The mother doesn't have to necessarily work, or if the mother does have to work, there are parents or grandparents who can take care of the children. And what they're trying to do is they want to shift funding from universal childcare to what they're calling in-home childcare. But this ignores the fact that there are a lot of single-family parent homes, that there are two-parent homes where both parents have to work, or that ignores the fact that there are not always grandparents or other family members who can or who are alive to take care of children, and it reduces funding in an area where American families really need it the most. Repeals the bipartisan infrastructure bill. This bill has been praised by even a lot of the Republicans who have taken credit for it, even though they voted against it. In particular, as it relates to the African American community, the infrastructure bill has helped to kind of replace water pipes and areas in underserved areas that have been neglected for a long time. One area that I'm pretty sure comes to mind for a lot of people is Flint, Michigan. It helps to keep that from happening by replacing pipes, by replacing infrastructure, by upgrading areas. And this, they're calling for the repeal of this when a lot of these programs have already been underway. They would just stop in their tracks and take away the funding. Cancels most subsidy programs for family farms. This one is especially egregious to me, considering the fact that a number of rural families tend to overwhelmingly vote for Republicans. And what this does, it takes away a couple of programs that actually help family farms to kind of stay afloat if they have, unforeseen circumstances like a dip in the market or natural disasters that cause issues and cause problems with their income, but it would help to keep them from not having to lose the family farm. And I put the problem of Social Security. Project 2025 does not particularly spell out what they wanted to do with Social Security, but they call it a problem and something that needs to be addressed. Just judging by everything else that I've read, it doesn't seem like that problem is going to be, solved in a way that's going to be beneficial to Social Security recipients. One thing they do talk about is Social Security as it relates to unemployment insurance and the desire to privatize those programs. So I suspect that may be the route that they may consider taking, but it doesn't particularly address that. It just calls it a problem. Physical and mental health. Dismantling of the Affordable Care Act. So there are actually a number of like a million little cuts within Project 2025 that work to dismantle the Affordable Care Act. One of the things they want to do is to kind of really promote private insurance. And if any of us looked at the presidential debate, we saw that President Trump said that he had a concept of a replacement for the Affordable Care Act, even though he talked about repealing and replace about 9 years ago when he first took office. So they're calling for the dismantling of the Affordable Care Act, I guess, with the concept of a replacement of the Affordable Care Act. Repeals legislation that lowers the cost of insulin and other drugs. Currently, Medicare recipients, the elderly, are able to get insulin, I believe, at like $39 for a month. I don't have that particular number, but I know it's drastically reduced from what they were paying before the price limits were put on there. The Biden-Harris administration have communicated that they want to extend those discounts to Medicare and Medicaid and to the ACA. And along with other drugs, because they talk about how there's price gouging within the prices for certain drugs. The authors of Project 2025 claim that having the prices reduced will reduce patient access to new medication, and they want the negotiations to be repealed. Places time limits and funding caps on Medicaid coverage. This basically, they're calling for a time limit, a certain amount of time that a Medicaid recipient can receive medical coverage, or also a cap on the amount of funds that can be used. The only problem with that is that the vast majority of Medicaid recipients are either children, the elderly, the people who are institutionalized, or people who are handicapped. This assumes that they would that if there was a funding cap, that it would stop them being dependent on Medicaid, when the vast majority of people who depend on it have absolutely no other means of being able to get other kinds of health insurance. So this would essentially leave a number of people simply without health care. Weakens regulations governing the production of baby formula. The authors of Project 2025 want to weaken the regulations governing the production of baby formula and point to the lack of baby formula available during the pandemic. The only problem is one of the biggest reasons why there was no baby formula on the shelves was because there was a contamination of Similac because of lack of oversight. So they want to further weaken that, which would basically be a circular issue that would create more problems in terms of baby care. And the contamination of the Similac actually led to the death of 2 children, which is one of the reasons why the Similac was removed. And actually, if you, because you guys are in the West Virginia area, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with what happened in Virginia with Boar's Head, and how Boar's Head disclosed their Virginia factory because of the contamination that killed a number of people who consumed their products. This is a direct result of a weakening of oversight and inspection by the Trump administration that led to the lack of oversight and inspection of the Boar's Head plant, that led to a contamination that led to these deaths. So we do not want to weaken regulations governing production of baby formula. Allows employers to hire children for dangerous jobs. If you look at this quote, it paints it like there are kids who want to take on dangerous jobs, but federal oversight forbids them from doing it. The reality of this is that the vast majority of children who may end up taking on these dangerous jobs are undocumented or immigrant children who we've seen have been working in like rendering plants or food or meat processing plants, who have been permanently injured, or some of them have died because they have been put on these, have been given these dangerous jobs. And the idea of giving a child or giving someone with an, whose frontal cortex is not fully developed, putting them in charge of something of a dangerous job should be frightening to most people. Denies veterans disability benefits for health conditions that are considered ineligible by the administration. This one basically makes the diagnosis of a problem by a veteran that has been attributed to their time serving in the military subject to approval by the administration. One particular thing that they pointed out, in particular in Project 2025, is burn pits. And if any of you are familiar with burn pits, they are, the burning of supplies that a lot of service members lived next to while they were serving overseas. Beau Biden, the eldest son of President Joe Biden, passed away from brain cancer that was attributed to his time living near a burn pit while he was serving. The project.
Can I say something real quick? I'm sorry. My name's Aaron Mann.
Hello. Yes.
I'm a veteran. I was deployed in Saudi Arabia. I'm going to be real quick. In the burn pits, we had to sign a waiver for the burn pits, and they told us that if we have any problems later on in life, that we will be taken care of. So,
wow,
that didn't happen. Okay, that wasn't and you are giving me so much right now. And I'm not
Wow.
gonna say I'm not gonna keep you out, and I'm sorry, but
No, this
I
is
was
important
I,
information.
I was part of that, and this is my point in terms of I was going to type it, but all I'm saying, if we fall on this 2025, we're just going to be a communist country following on like Mein Kampf from when Hitler was in office.
Yeah.
This scares me.
It's very
So,
scary. Yep.
and so, but I went to the VA and they were very good. And my fear is that I'm 100% service connected disability.
Mm-hmm.
And I rely on that for my way of life because I served my country for 23 years.
Mm-hmm.
And for this, that's why we got to vote. But this regime, if it happens, we're going to be in trouble. And the other thing is, real quick, when I saw the farmers' subsidies, they've relied on federal government for when the rain was bad or the crops weren't
Mm-hmm.
growing properly, and the farmers had to, because that they feed our nation,
Yep.
and that. But my question is to you, and it's rhetorical. Okay, they try to say to me, what I get is they're trying to save this money. Where's the money going? And how is it going to affect the deficit? And who's reaping the benefits of all these benefits and programs being disseminated?
Yeah.
That's enough. I'm sorry.
No. What you said is extremely important. My dad was in the military. He served in the Army for 23 years. And when he passed away, he served in Korea. He got an injury to his leg that actually eventually led to his death. And we were able to get benefits because of that. And under something like this, it could be arbitrarily denied. And so you mentioning that is a big deal and it's extremely important. And you make all great points.
And I think what the point is, what people don't really understand about insurance, and I make sure I tell everybody, as we get older, we got Medicaid and Medicare, but insurance is so expensive, especially when we retire, because we don't have that other, we don't have our employer paying that other part of it. And that crushes us as we get older. Fortunately, I am in the military, or retired from the military, so I do have some benefits to where my family is protected for now. But if that's going away, and I'm afraid, like I said, if they take that away from us, I don't know. I don't want to work till I'm 70. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't want to do that.
That's the unfortunate thing is that when you read it, there's no alternative. There's no, well, we're going to replace it with something else. It's just gone. And so that is, that's what makes Project 2025 particularly frightening because it takes away a lot and it doesn't really give back much. So yeah, nope. I thank you so much for the comment with that. So I'm going to go into physical and mental health. Another part is that it makes genetically modified food labeling optional. And I was actually torn between physical and mental health and economic development because this this hurts in two ways. The first thing is if you do not want to eat GMO products, right now you can go into a store, you can look at the labeling and it shows you this is non-GMO. Okay, great. You trust that and you're able to go ahead and buy that product. This takes away your choice. It takes away your freedom to determine what you want to put into your body. But additionally, it hurts farmers who grow organically or who grow non-GMO products because the vast majority of countries have at least a requirement that GMO products have to be labeled, and non-GMO products have to be labeled. But there are many countries in Africa, in the Caribbean, in Europe, in Asia that will not import GMO products at all into their countries. So not only are you taking away choices from American citizens, but you are hobbling the businesses of American farmers that want to export or American producers that want to export because they cannot trust the foreign governments would not be able to trust the labeling if it's optional. Weakens overall environmental protections and makes a declaration of public health emergency subject to congressional approval. This is particularly interesting because when you think about, when during the COVID pandemic, And there was a unilateral decision to declare it a public health emergency and to take steps to keep, to mitigate the deaths and the people who contracted COVID-19. If this were to go into play, this would make this subject to congressional approval, which means we'd have to go through an entire bill process for them to approve for there to be a public health emergency, which means that many more people could die, many more people could be injured, many more people could be hurt while Congress decided if this was an emergency or not. Now, this is my last slide, and I saved the worst, I guess some of the worst for last. And it talks about the many attacks on women's reproductive health. So I'm just going to shoot through this pretty quickly so you kind of see the many ways. And I don't know if you guys realize that the Democrats put up an IVF protection bill today in the Senate, and the Senate Republicans blocked that from going through again. So even though IVF is not listed on this list, it is one of the things that is in danger because of Project 2025. So it prohibits Planned Parenthood from receiving federal funds. Outside of abortion care, Planned Parenthood is the primary source of medical care for a lot of Americans, especially Americans in rural areas who may not have any other options. Prohibiting them from getting any type of federal funding cuts off any sort of medical care for a large number of Americans, especially those in rural areas. It allows medical students to opt into abortion care training. So currently, medical students have to opt out of abortion care training, but this changed it so they have to opt in. And as many of you know, abortion care does not just necessarily mean just, an optional or abortions. It also means taking care of someone who may have had a miscarriage or has an ectopic pregnancy where the life is in danger. And having or deploying medical students who have graduated who are becoming doctors who do not know how to perform that care is life-threatening to the life of the mother. Monthly tracking of fertility rates. This calls for a tracking of family fertility rates and a reporting on those rates like they do the jobs report every month. It's just invasive. I have no other words for that. Reverse the CDC approval of abortion drug mifepristone. This is the drug that is being widely used that provides a safer abortion care for individuals and is not nearly as invasive, and they want to reverse it just based on the administration's views on abortion. Bars travel funding for abortion care. So currently, as President Trump said, he gave it back to the states. If you live in a state that does not provide abortion care and you want to travel to another state to get abortion care, you cannot use any federal funds to help you with travel, which will essentially leave you stranded in the state that will not provide that care. Allows employers to deny abortion care and medical insurance packages. Even though this is a package that you have earned as an employer of the company, they can deny abortion care within that medical insurance package. But not only do they deny you medical insurance, abortion care within the medical insurance package, it also gives them the ability to deny you contraceptive care within the medical insurance package. So you can't prevent from getting pregnant. And if you were to get pregnant, you can't get abortion care services. There's a lot more within Project 2025. I ran over some of the biggest parts of it. I provided the link to the Savannah Tribune articles, and also we have the memes and the information that we're putting out on a daily basis. So if you want access, you can email me at bclear2025@gmail.com, and feel free to look at the Savannah Tribune articles and share it far and wide, because a lot of people have no idea what's in this. We're trying to make it bite-sized so that individuals aren't inundated with all the information that's in the 920 pages. So feel free to contact so that you can share this information. And I'll open it up to questions.
Tammy, if there are no questions in the chat,
No questions in the chat.
All right, excellent. Then we'll throw this now to Erica Logan.
Good evening, and thank you, Sora Crockett. And wow, thank you, Nicole Adams. That was a comprehensive review of Project 25. I am sufficiently terrified. No, no, definitely. I mean, I'm sure everybody heard at least one thing that has to be at a minimum concerning. All the more reason that this election has high stakes. It's just very important that we all be informed and understand what is in this document. As I said, you provided a wonderful overview, not more than an overview, took us through much of it. But, I encourage everyone to look at, investigate, look, reach out and get more information about Project 25. Also, I know Seth DiStefano had to drop off, but also appreciated him taking us through the importance of a committee, the caucus and interims in terms of the legislative process. Both understanding that process and understanding Project 25 is really important to be, being a civically engaged voter, an informed voter. It's important that we're all engaged in the process, that we educate ourselves, check your status, check your registration, your voter status to make sure you're registered. All of that is important. And that is why we host events like this evening. As a reminder, in the chat, there's a link to a survey. If you haven't done so already, please click the link and just take a few minutes to complete the survey and let us know if this was informative for you, if this was useful, and if we should continue doing programming like this in the future. And then also, I want to remind everybody that on October 26th, our chapter will be partnering with the local NAACP chapters, and we're going to stroll to the polls. So we will meet at our early voting polling sites, and we are going to go in as a group and vote early. And if you can't make it that day, make your vote plan and vote early when you can. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Also, thank you to our technology support this evening. So our Tamara Togans, who always supports our events very well and completely. So Kimberly, I'll turn it back to you in case you want to say anything else.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We actually did get one question in the chat as you were closing up, Erica, and I did want to ask Ms. Adams if she would answer this question, because I do think it's an important question. So we're going to take one small step back and then we'll close today's event out. Nicole, if you could tell us, does abortion care include when a woman is miscarrying, looking at the plan of Project 2025?
Unfortunately, yes, it opens it up. If you looked at, actually, I think there was the Atlantic just put out an article about the number of women who have been denied abortion care. They call it I can't remember what the actual name is. There's a healthcare professional in there. The act of actually clearing out the uterus once a woman has has lost a baby. These same women are being denied that care because doctors and healthcare professionals don't want it to seem like they performed an abortion. So they basically take it up to the point where the woman, her fever is high, she's developed sepsis, she's near death's door, and then they perform it because it can be classified as to save the life of the mother. But a lot of times it doesn't work because they've waited too long. So yes, unfortunately, and because of a lot of the laws within different states is so muddy that a lot of healthcare professionals don't want to take the chance, because they could possibly go to jail if somebody determines, wait a minute, you performed an abortion, you didn't perform assistance to a woman who was already miscarrying.
Thank you. I appreciate those comments. And I'm going to tie it to our West Virginia legislature. We've had bills that have been introduced that would put reporting in place for medical professionals, on this very issue. So these issues are ripe for our consideration. We need to make ourselves familiar with Project 2025, we need to make ourselves familiar with the West Virginia legislative process for those who are joining us who are here in West Virginia. And the only way that we can really have an impact at all is to be engaged and to vote. So we want to remind you, our election is November 5th. Make sure that your registration is still there, that you haven't been purged from the polls. And stroll with us. Stroll with us to the polls, as Sora Logan, as our Delta Sora mentioned. Stroll with us to the polls. All right, thank you. We appreciate everyone for joining us this evening and look forward to you being a part of our programs in the future. Good evening.